The research ship Endeavour moved slowly through space near the edge of human territory. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, looking at the stars through the big windows. His crew had been exploring this area for 3 months, mapping new star systems and looking for signs of life. "Captain, we have something strange on our sensors," said Navigator Pete Williams from his station. His voice sounded worried. "There's a big ship about 2 million kilometers away. It's not moving." Jake walked over to Pete's screen. The object was huge, much bigger than any human ship. It looked like it was made of dark metal with strange curves and sharp edges. "Is it alive? I mean, are there life signs on it?" Dr. Lisa Carter, the ship's scientist who studied alien life, checked her instruments. "Yes, Captain. I'm reading one very large life form. But the signals are getting weaker. Whatever is on that ship might be dying." Jake thought for a moment. Finding alien life was what every human explorer dreamed about, but it could also be very dangerous. "Commander Torres, get your security team ready. Dr. Carter, bring your medical equipment. We're going to take a look." Commander Ryan Torres was the ship's security chief. He was a big man who had fought in many battles. "Sir, this could be a trap. We don't know anything about this alien ship or what's inside it." "I understand your worry, Ryan, but we can't just leave a dying creature alone in space. If we were dying out here, we would want someone to help us." The Endeavour moved closer to the alien ship. It was even bigger than they thought, almost like a small city floating in space. The ship's hull was black as night, and strange symbols were carved into its surface. There were no lights anywhere on the ship. "I'm not getting any power readings," Pete said. "The ship is completely dead except for that one life sign." Jake made his decision. "Prepare the shuttle. Small team only. Me, Dr. Carter, Commander Torres, and 2 security officers. Everyone else stays here and keeps the ship ready to run if we need to." The shuttle flew toward the alien ship. Up close, they could see that it had been damaged in some kind of battle. There were holes in the hull and scorch marks from weapons. Dr. Carter used her scanners to find a way inside. "There's an airlock on the lower section that still has atmosphere," she said. "The air is safe for us to breathe." They docked with the alien ship and opened the airlock. The inside was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the walls. The corridors were huge, built for creatures much bigger than humans. Everything smelled strange, like metal and something wild. Commander Torres led the way with his weapon ready. The walls were covered with more of those strange symbols. Some looked like they might be pictures of battles or hunts. "This ship belongs to warriors," he said quietly. They followed Dr. Carter's scanner toward the life sign. The corridor opened into a massive room that looked like it might be the ship's bridge. In the center of the room, lying on the floor, was the most frightening creature any of them had ever seen. It looked like a wolf, but it was huge. Even lying down, it was bigger than a human. Its fur was silver and black, and its claws were as long as knives. Scars covered its body, telling the story of many battles. Its eyes were the color of gold, and they were looking right at the humans. "My God," whispered Dr. Carter. "It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time." The creature tried to lift its head when it saw them. It made a sound that was part growl and part whine. Jake could see that it was badly hurt and very weak. This was clearly a predator, something that could kill them all without trying hard. But right now, it was just a dying animal. "Can we help it?" Jake asked Dr. Carter. She scanned the creature with her medical equipment. "I don't think so, Captain. It's lost too much blood, and I don't know anything about its biology. It doesn't have long. The creature made another sound and moved its massive paw. Jake saw something that made his heart stop. Behind the dying predator were two small bundles of fur. They were tiny, no bigger than house cats, baby versions of the huge creature in front of them. The babies were shivering and making small crying sounds. They were clearly hungry and scared. The big creature, their parent, pushed the babies toward the humans with its paw. It looked directly at Jake and made a sound that their translation device picked up as one word. Protect. Jake stared at the dying creature. This was a predator that could have eaten him for breakfast, but with its last strength it was asking humans to take care of its children. It was the most amazing and heartbreaking thing he had ever seen. It wants us to take care of them, Dr. Carter said with wonder in her voice. A dying parent asking strangers to protect its babies. The big creature looked at each human as if it was studying them. Then it made that sound again. Protect. Its golden eyes closed, and its breathing became very shallow. Commander Torres lowered his weapon. Even this tough soldier was moved by what he was seeing. Captain, what do we do? Jake looked at the tiny creatures crawling toward them. They seemed to know that their parent was dying. They were looking at the humans with big, scared eyes. We do what it asked. We protect them. Dr. Carter carefully picked up the two babies. They were warm and soft, and they made small sounds that almost sounded like purring. They're so young, maybe only a few weeks old. The big creature opened its eyes one more time. It looked at its babies in the human's arms, and Jake swore he saw relief in those golden eyes. Then, with one final breath, the great predator died. The humans stood in silence for a moment. They had just witnessed something incredible. A dying alien had trusted them with the most precious thing it had, its children. We need to get them back to the ship, Jake said finally. They need food and warmth. As they walked back through the dark corridors carrying the alien babies, Jake wondered what they had just gotten themselves into. These creatures would grow up to be powerful predators. But right now, they were just babies who needed someone to care for them. The dying creature had looked into their eyes and seen something it trusted. Jake hoped they could live up to that trust. Back on the Endeavor, the crew gathered in the main meeting room. The two alien babies sat in a makeshift bed that Dr. Carter had built for them. They were no longer crying, but they looked around with curious eyes at all the humans watching them. "This is crazy," said Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's doctor. She stood with her arms crossed, looking worried. "We have no idea what these things eat, what diseases they might carry, or how dangerous they could become when they grow up." The babies made soft sounds and crawled closer to each other. One of them, slightly bigger than the other, had a small, white patch on its forehead. Dr. Carter had started calling that one Storm. The smaller one, with darker fur, she called Shadow. "They're just babies," Dr. Carter said, gently touching Storm's fur. "Look at them. They're scared and alone. Their parent trusted us to take care of them." "Their parent was a killing machine," Dr. Foster replied. "Did you see the size of those claws, those teeth? These babies will grow up to be the same thing." Navigator Pete Williams spoke up from his chair. "Maybe we should drop them off at the space station near Jupiter. Let the scientists there figure out what to do with them." Commander Torres shook his head. "The space station doesn't have the right equipment to care for alien babies. They would probably just put them in cages and study them until they died. Captain Jake Morrison had been quiet, watching the babies and listening to his crew argue. Shadow had crawled to the edge of the bed and was looking directly at him with bright yellow eyes. There was something very intelligent in that look. "Captain," Dr. Foster continued, "I understand you want to help them, but think about the danger. What happens when they get bigger and their hunting instincts kick in? What if they see us as food?" "What if they don't?" Jake replied. "What if we raise them to see us as family?" Dr. Carter nodded. "That's exactly what I was thinking. These babies have no memory of hunting or killing. If we raise them with love and care, they might grow up to be different from their wild relatives." "That's a big gamble," said Communications Officer Mike Barnes. "You're betting our lives that love can overcome nature." Storm made a small sound and tried to climb out of the bed. Jake reached down and picked up the baby predator. It was surprisingly light and felt warm in his hands. Storm looked up at Jake and made a purring sound like a cat. "Look at this," Jake said to his crew. "This little one isn't thinking about hunting or killing. It just wants to be held and comforted." Shadow saw Jake holding Storm and made a lonely crying sound. Dr. Carter quickly picked up the smaller baby. "They don't like being separated," she observed. "They need each other for comfort." The crew watched as the two babies reached out to touch each other, even while being held by different humans. Their bond was obvious and touching. "I've been studying the recordings from the alien ship," said Dr. Carter. "I think their parent was trying to tell us something important. The way it looked at us, the way it studied us before asking us to protect its children. It wasn't just desperate. It was making a choice." "What kind of choice?" asked Commander Torres. "It could have hidden its babies somewhere on the ship. It could have tried to fight us even while dying. Instead, it chose to trust us. That means it saw something in humans that made it believe we were worthy guardians." Dr. Foster still looked worried. "But what about when they grow up? These aren't pets. They're predators." "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Jake said firmly. "Right now, they're babies who need our help. The right thing to do is take care of them." "And if Earth Command doesn't like our decision," asked Pete, "then I'll take full responsibility," Jake replied. "I'm the captain. The choice is mine to make." Dr. Carter smiled. "I think we should take them to Earth. This could be the most important scientific discovery in human history. Not just because we found alien life, but because we might learn how to build bridges between different species." Commander Torres looked thoughtful. "My grandmother always said that you can judge people by how they treat those who can't protect themselves. These babies can't protect themselves. If we abandon them, what does that say about us?" The babies had fallen asleep in the humans' arms. They looked peaceful and innocent, nothing like the fearsome predator their parent had been. "They need names," said Dr. Carter. "Real names, not just Storm and Shadow." "Storm and Shadow are good names," Jake said. "They fit them." Dr. Foster sighed. "If we're really going to do this insane thing, we need to set up proper care for them. They'll need special food, medical attention, and a safe place to live. I can convert one of the storage rooms into a nursery," offered engineer Tony Rodriguez. "Put in soft floors, safe toys, things babies would need." "I'll work on figuring out their diet," said Dr. Carter. "Their parents' ship might have food, storage areas we can study. And I'll make sure they're always supervised," added Commander Torres. "If they show any signs of aggression as they grow, we'll know immediately." Jake looked around at his crew. A few minutes ago, they had been arguing about whether to keep the alien babies. Now they were making plans to care for them. This was why he loved his crew. When it came down to doing the right thing, they always came through. "All right, then," Jake said. "We're taking Storm and Shadow home with us. Dr. Carter, start working on their care plan. Tony, get that nursery ready. Everyone else, let's keep this quiet until we reach Earth. No need to worry the families back home until we know more." Storm opened one eye and looked at Jake, then closed it again and went back to sleep. Shadow made a tiny snoring sound that made several crew members smile. "I hope we're doing the right thing," Dr. Foster said quietly. "So do I," Jake replied. "But I know we're doing the human thing, and sometimes that's all we can do." As the crew dispersed to begin preparations, Jake continued holding Storm. The alien baby felt so small and helpless in his arms. Its parent had been a mighty warrior, but it had chosen love over fear, trust over suspicion. Jake hoped that when Storm and Shadow grew up, they would remember the kindness they received as babies. He hoped they would choose to be bridges between worlds, instead of weapons of war. Only time would tell if that hope was foolish or wise. 3 months had passed since the crew of the Endeavor had rescued Storm and Shadow. The ship was still traveling toward Earth, and the 2 alien babies had grown much larger than anyone expected. Storm now stood as tall as a medium-sized dog, while Shadow was only slightly smaller. Their fur had become thicker and more beautiful, with Storm's silver markings becoming more pronounced and Shadow's coat turning deep black with hints of blue. Dr. Carter spent most of her time studying the growing cubs and documenting their behavior. What she discovered amazed her every day. The babies were incredibly smart, much smarter than any Earth animal she had ever worked with. "Look at this," she said to Captain Morrison as they watched Storm in the converted storage room that had become the cubs' home. Storm was standing in front of the door, reaching up to touch the control panel. The door opened, and Storm walked through it like he had done it 100 times before. "How did he learn to do that?" Jake asked, impressed. "I've been watching him for weeks," Dr. Carter replied. "First, he just watched us open the door. Then he started reaching for the panel. Yesterday, he figured out exactly which button to press. He learned by watching and thinking. Shadow was equally clever, but in different ways. While Storm was interested in how things worked, Shadow was more interested in people. The smaller cub had learned to recognize every crew member by their walk, their smell, and even their mood. When Communications Officer Mike Barnes came into the room looking sad because he had received bad news from home, Shadow immediately went to him and made soft, comforting sounds. The cub seemed to understand when humans were upset and always tried to help them feel better. "It's like they can read our emotions," observed Dr. Foster, who had become one of the cubs' biggest supporters after seeing how gentle they were. "Shadow always knows when someone needs comfort." The cubs had also learned their names perfectly. When someone called Storm, the larger cub would immediately look up and respond. When they called Shadow, the smaller cub would come running. They even responded to simple commands like sit and stay, though they sometimes chose to ignore commands if they thought they knew better. But what really amazed the crew was how protective the cubs had become of their human family. This became clear during an accident in the cargo bay that could have been very serious. Engineer Tony Rodriguez was working on some heavy equipment when a support cable snapped. A large metal beam came crashing down toward him. Tony dove to the side, but he hit his head on another piece of equipment and was knocked unconscious. Storm and Shadow happened to be in the cargo bay at the time, playing with some old boxes under Commander Torres's supervision. The moment they heard the crash and saw Tony fall, both cubs rushed to his side. They didn't try to move Tony, which could have hurt him more. Instead, they positioned themselves on either side of his body, facing outward. Storm made a low growling sound toward the damaged equipment, as if warning it not to hurt Tony again. Shadow made soft whimpering sounds and gently nuzzled Tony's hand. When Commander Torres reached them, the cubs looked up at him with worried expressions. Storm made a sound that the translator interpreted as hurt, while Shadow pointed at Tony with his paw. "They're trying to tell me he's injured," Torres realized. "They're protecting him and asking for help." Dr. Foster arrived quickly and began treating Tony's injuries. The cubs stayed close but didn't get in her way. They seemed to understand that she was helping their friend. When Tony finally woke up, the first thing he saw was Shadow's concerned face looking down at him. "Hey there, little one," Tony said weakly. "Were you watching over me?" Shadow made a happy chirping sound and very gently licked Tony's forehead. Storm came over and rubbed his head against Tony's arm, being very careful not to use his claws. Word of the cubs' protective behavior spread quickly through the ship. Soon, everyone wanted to spend time with Storm and Shadow. During off-duty hours, crew members would visit the cubs' room to play games or just relax with them. The cubs loved the attention. They learned to play gentle games with the humans, always, being careful not to use their claws or teeth. Storm especially enjoyed playing hide-and-seek, using his growing intelligence to find better and better hiding spots. Shadow preferred quieter games and would often just sit with crew members who needed someone to talk to. Navigator Pete Williams discovered that both cubs loved music. When he played guitar in the evening, they would sit quietly and listen, sometimes, making soft sounds that almost sounded like singing along. "I think they're trying to learn our language," Dr. Carter told Captain Morrison one evening. "Not just individual words, but the rhythm and melody of how we speak." Jake was reviewing the security footage from that day, something he did every evening to make sure the cubs were healthy and happy. The videos showed Storm and Shadow playing with various crew members, learning new things, and always looking out for each other and their human friends. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to a section of video where Shadow was comforting Engineer Rodriguez after his accident. "That cub understands that Tony was hurt and needed comfort. That's not just animal instinct, that's empathy." Dr. Carter nodded. Both cubs show remarkable emotional intelligence. They formed individual relationships with each crew member. They remember who likes to play rough games and who prefers gentle interaction. They know who to go to when they want to learn something new and who to approach when they just want affection. The cubs had also developed their own ways of communicating with the humans. When they were hungry, they would go to the food storage area and make specific sounds. When they wanted to play, they would bring toys to their favorite humans. When they were tired, they would curl up in their sleeping area and make soft purring sounds until someone came to say goodnight to them. "They've become part of our family," said Commander Torres. "I can't imagine this ship without them now." "The question is," Dr. Foster said thoughtfully, "what happens when we reach Earth? Will other people see what we see in them?" Jake wondered. About that, too. The cubs were growing fast, and their predatory features were becoming more obvious. Their claws were longer now, though they kept them retracted around humans. Their teeth were sharper, even though they were always gentle when playing. Their muscles were developing quickly, and they were becoming very strong, but their personalities remained sweet and loving. They had learned to be careful with their strength around humans. They never used their claws during play, and they had never shown any aggression toward anyone on the ship. "We have detailed records of everything," Dr. Carter said. "Videos, medical, scans, behavioral studies, Anyone who looks at our data will see that these cubs are remarkable beings capable of love, loyalty, and intelligence. Storm appeared in the doorway of the room where they were talking. He looked at each human and made a questioning sound, as if asking if he could join them. When Jake nodded, Storm walked over and sat down next to the captain's chair, resting, his head against Jake's leg. Shadow followed a moment later, going directly to Dr. Carter and curling up at her feet. Both cubs looked content and peaceful, surrounded by their human family. "Whatever happens on Earth," Jake said, scratching Storm behind the ears, "we'll face it together. These cubs trust us, and we won't let them down." The cubs made soft, happy sounds in response, as if they understood and agreed with everything their human father had said. The Endeavor finally reached Earth after its long journey home. Storm and Shadow had grown even larger during the final weeks of travel. They now stood almost 3 feet tall and weighed as much as large dogs. Their alien features were becoming more obvious as they matured, but their gentle nature with the crew had never changed. Captain Morrison received a message from Earth Command as soon as they entered Earth's solar system. Admiral Helen Pierce wanted to speak with him immediately about the alien specimens on his ship. Captain Morrison, Admiral Pierce's stern face appeared on the communication screen. "I've read your reports about these alien creatures. This is a serious security matter. As soon as you dock, those aliens will be transferred to a secure military facility for study." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Admiral, with respect, Storm and Shadow aren't specimens. They're intelligent beings who have formed bonds with my crew. Taking them away from the only family they've known could be harmful to them. Captain, these are potentially dangerous alien predators. They belong in containment, not running around a spaceship playing with your crew like pets." Dr. Carter stepped forward. "Admiral Pierce, I've documented every aspect of their development. These cubs have shown remarkable intelligence and emotional capacity. They've never displayed any aggressive behavior toward humans." Admiral Pierce looked unimpressed. "Doctor, good intentions don't change biology. These creatures are predators. When they reach full size, their instincts will take over. We can't risk civilian lives based on your feelings." The conversation was interrupted when Storm and Shadow entered the bridge. They had learned the ship's schedule and knew this was the time their human family usually gathered here. Storm immediately went to Captain Morrison and sat beside his chair. Shadow approached Dr. Carter and made a soft questioning sound, sensing that something was wrong. Admiral Pierce stared at the cubs through the screen. Even she seemed surprised by how large and impressive they had become. Storm's silver fur gleamed under the bridge lights, and his intelligent golden eyes looked directly at the screen as if he knew he was being judged. "I see what you mean about their size," the Admiral said quietly. "They're magnificent, but that makes them even more dangerous." Shadow moved closer to Dr. Carter and made a soft, whimpering sound. The cub could sense the tension in the room and was trying to comfort the humans he cared about. "Look at them, Admiral," Jake said. "They know something is wrong, and they're trying to help us feel better. These aren't mindless beasts." Meanwhile, news of the alien cubs had reached the general public. Someone had leaked footage of Storm and Shadow playing with the crew during their journey. The video spread across the internet within hours, showing the massive alien cubs gently playing with human children during a virtual family call one of the crew members had made. Public opinion split immediately. Some people thought the cubs were amazing and wanted to learn more about them. Others were terrified and demanded that the aliens be destroyed before they could hurt anyone. Senator Greg Walsh held a press conference demanding immediate action. These alien monsters could be the advanced scouts of an invasion, he declared. We should destroy them now before they can signal their home planet. But many people disagreed. Dr. Margaret Kelly, a famous scientist who studied animal behavior, appeared on news programs defending the cubs. What I see in these videos is remarkable intelligence and emotional development. These beings could teach us incredible things about forming relationships across species lines. The debate grew more heated when child psychologist Dr. Patricia Moore analyzed the leaked footage. These alien cubs are showing behaviors that we typically only see in the most intelligent Earth animals, and some behaviors that go beyond what we've ever observed. They're not just smart, they're emotionally sophisticated. On the ship, the crew watched the news reports with growing worry. Storm and Shadow seemed to sense that their future was uncertain. They stayed closer to their favorite humans and were more affectionate than usual, as if they were trying to comfort their family during a difficult time. "It's not fair," said navigator Pete Williams. "People are making judgments about Storm and Shadow without ever meeting them. If they could spend just one day with these cubs, they would see what amazing beings they are." Dr. Foster, who had initially been worried about the cubs, was now one of their strongest defenders. "I've watched them grow up. I've seen how they think, how they care about others, how they solve problems. Anyone who wants to lock them up or hurt them will have to go through me first." Captain Morrison received another message, this time from Dr. Richard Hayes at the Department of Xenobiology. "Captain, I need to study these aliens immediately. Their genetic structure could hold the key to understanding alien evolution. A few tissue samples won't hurt them much." "Absolutely not," Jake replied firmly. "They're not laboratory animals. They're intelligent beings with rights." The situation became more complicated when news outlets discovered that both cubs had learned to understand much more human language than anyone had realized. During one of Dr. Carter's regular behavioral sessions, Shadow responded to complex questions by pointing to different pictures on a screen. When Dr. Carter asked, "Which picture shows someone who is sad?" Shadow immediately pointed to a picture of a crying child. When she asked, "What do you do when someone is hurt?" Shadow pointed to a picture of someone helping an injured person. Storm demonstrated even more advanced understanding. When asked, "What is your favorite thing about humans?" Storm walked over to a picture of a human family hugging each other and placed his paw on it. The footage of these sessions was leaked to the public and created an even bigger sensation. People who supported the cubs pointed to it as proof of their intelligence and emotional capacity. Those who opposed them claimed it was just clever training, like teaching a dog tricks. Professional linguist Dr. Carol Manning studied the videos and made a shocking announcement. "Based on the cubs' responses and body language, I believe they understand human speech at approximately the level of a 10-year-old child. This isn't just pattern recognition. They comprehend abstract concepts like emotions, relationships, and moral behavior." As the Endeavour approached Earth's docking station, the crew gathered for what might be their last meal together with Storm and Shadow. The cubs seemed to understand that something important was happening. They stayed close to their humans and made soft sounds that seemed almost like they were trying to say goodbye. "Whatever happens," Captain Morrison told his crew, "we know the truth about Storm and Shadow. We know they're capable of love, loyalty, and intelligence. We know they chose to trust humans, just like their parent did." Storm walked around the room, gently touching each crew member with his nose, as if he was memorizing their scents. Shadow curled up next to Dr. Carter and made the purring sound that always meant he felt safe and loved. "We won't abandon them," Dr. Carter said firmly. These cubs saved themselves by trusting us. Now it's time for us to save them by fighting for their rights." Commander Torres nodded. "I've been in a lot of battles, but this might be the most important one. These cubs represent the possibility of peace between species. If we fail them, we fail ourselves." As Earth grew larger in the viewing windows, the crew of the Endeavour prepared for the fight of their lives. They had promised a dying alien warrior that they would protect his children. Now they would have to protect them from their own species. Storm and Shadow sat together, looking out at the blue planet that would either become their home or their prison. They didn't understand all the human politics and fear, but they understood one thing perfectly. They trusted their human family to keep them safe. The question was whether love and trust would be enough to overcome fear and prejudice. Dr. Carter had been working for weeks to decode the computer systems from Storm and Shadow's father's ship. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but she had finally broken through the language barriers with help from the translation, programs that had been improved by studying the Cubs' own communication attempts. What she discovered in the ship's data logs changed everything. "Captain Morrison, you need to see this immediately," she called over the ship's communication system. Her voice was filled with excitement and amazement. Jake hurried to Dr. Carter's laboratory, where she had set up several screens showing translated text and images from the alien ship's computers. Storm and Shadow were with her, as they often were. They seemed fascinated by the pictures and sounds from their father's ship, as if they were learning about their own history. "Jake, this is incredible," Dr. Carter said, pointing to the screens. "I've been translating the ship's logs, and what I found, it changes everything we thought we knew about what happened." The main screen showed a three-dimensional map of space with colored lines showing the movement of the alien ship over many months. This ship, commanded by someone called Kethvar, had been watching human space for almost a year before we found it. "Watching us?" Jake asked, feeling a chill. "You mean spying on us?" "Not spying exactly. Look at this." Dr. Carter brought up another screen showing recordings from the alien ship's sensors. The images showed human ships responding to emergency calls, rescue operations, and medical missions to distant colonies. "Kethvar was studying us," she continued, "but not our military strength or our technology. He was studying our behavior. Look at these files." The screen filled with detailed observations written in the alien language, now translated into English. Jake read with growing amazement. Human vessels consistently respond to distress calls from unknown sources, even at great risk to themselves. Humans show protective behavior toward young of all species, including their domestic animals. Human medical personnel treat injured beings regardless of species or origin. Humans form emotional bonds that override logical self-interest. Storm moved closer to the screen and made a soft sound when he saw images of his father's ship. "Doctor." Carter gently touched his head. "Your father was very smart, wasn't he, Storm?" "There's more," Dr. Carter continued. "I found personal logs that Kethvar recorded during his observations." She activated an audio file, and the deep, rumbling voice of the alien warrior filled the room, now translated into English. "I have observed the humans for many cycles now. They are weak in body compared to the Kethmori. But they possess something my people have forgotten in our centuries of warfare. They choose to protect instead of dominate. They risk their lives for strangers. They care for the helpless, not because they must, but because they believe it is right." Shadow made a questioning sound, and Dr. Carter played more of the recordings. "My cubs will not survive the journey to our home world. The damage to my ship is too severe, and I am dying from wounds that cannot be healed. But I have seen hope in these humans. If any species in the galaxy could raise Kethmori cubs to be more than killers, it would be them. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. He planned this. It wasn't desperation. He chose us deliberately. That's exactly right, Dr. Carter said. Look at this final entry, recorded just hours before we found his ship. Kethavar's voice continued. I go now to the coordinates where the human research vessel will find me. I have studied their patterns, their routes, their behavior. If they are truly the compassionate beings I believe them to be, they will not abandon my cubs. If I am wrong, then perhaps my cubs are meant to die with me. But if I am right, then perhaps my cubs will grow to become the bridge between our species that neither Kethmori nor humans dare to dream of. The laboratory fell silent except for the soft sounds Storm and Shadow made as they listened to their father's voice. Dr. Carter wiped tears from her eyes. He was a scientist as well as a warrior, she said. These logs contain detailed studies of human psychology, sociology, and behavior patterns. He understood us better than we understand ourselves in some ways. Jake studied the data on the screens. What else did you find? Information about their species, the Kethmori. They're not just random predators, Jake. They're an ancient warrior, race with a complex society built around honor, strength, and protection of the weak. But somewhere in their history, they lost the protection part and focused only on strength and warfare. Images appeared on the screen showing Kethmori cities and culture from better times. Beautiful architecture, art, and scenes of Kethmori, adults caring for their young with obvious love and gentleness. Kethvar believed that humans could teach his cubs what his own people had forgotten, that true strength comes from choosing to protect rather than choosing to destroy. Storm walked over to Jake and sat beside him, looking up with those intelligent golden eyes. The cubs seemed to understand that they were learning about something important. There's something else, Dr. Carter said, her voice becoming serious. The logs contain references to other Kethmori ships and something called the return cycle. What's that? From what I can translate, it appears that Kethmori culture has a tradition. When cubs are left with another species for care, their people return after exactly one solar cycle to evaluate how the cubs have been treated. Jake felt his blood run cold. You mean they're coming back? Not just coming back. According to these files, they're coming to judge us. If they determine that we've failed in our duty to care for the cubs, it means war between our species. If they determine that we've succeeded... She paused, looking at the screen. If we've succeeded, what happens? Then we become what Kethavar hoped for, the first species the Kethmori have ever considered worthy of alliance. According to their culture, any species capable of properly raising Kethmori cubs has proven they possess the warrior virtues, the Kethmori respect, combined with the wisdom to know when not to fight. Shadow made a soft, chirping sound and moved to Dr. Carter's side. She picked up the smaller cub, and he immediately began purring. When is this return cycle supposed to happen? Jake asked. Dr. Carter checked the timeline on her computer. Based on when we found Kethvar's ship, they should arrive in Earth's solar system in approximately 6 months. 6 months, Jake repeated. And Storm and Shadow will be the judges of whether we've succeeded or failed? According to these logs, yes. The cubs will choose whether to return with their people or stay with their adoptive family. But their choice isn't the only factor. The returning Kethmori will also evaluate how the cubs have been treated, what they've learned, and whether they've grown into worthy members of Kethmori society. Jake looked at Storm and Shadow, who were both watching him intently. These cubs weren't just alien pets they had rescued. They were ambassadors, teachers, and judges all at the same time. The future of both species might depend on how well humans had raised them. "We need to tell Earth Command about this immediately," Jake said. "Already working on it," Dr. Carter replied. "But Jake, there's one more thing. According to these logs, no species has ever successfully passed the return cycle evaluation. Every other species that attempted to care for Kethmori cubs either failed to keep them alive or raised them poorly." "What happened to those species?" Dr. Carter's expression grew grim. "The Kethmori went to war with them and won every time. They're not just an advanced species, Jake. They're the most successful warrior race in this part of the galaxy." Storm made a soft sound and gently touched Jake's hand with his paw. Despite everything they had just learned, the cub's gesture was one of comfort and affection. "But we're not going to fail," Jake said firmly, looking at both cubs. "Are we, Storm? Shadow? We're family now, and families stick together." Both cubs made happy sounds in response, and Jake hoped that their confidence in their human family would be enough when their people came to judge them all. 6 months had passed since Dr. Carter's discovery about the return cycle. Storm and Shadow were now magnificent adolescents, standing nearly 5 feet tall and weighing as much as large ponies. Their alien features had become more pronounced, but their loving nature toward humans had never wavered. Earth Command had spent those months preparing for the arrival of the Kethmori fleet. Military ships were positioned throughout the solar system, but everyone hoped that force wouldn't be necessary. Storm and Shadow had been moved to a special facility on Earth where they could be studied and evaluated, but Captain Morrison and his crew visited them every day. The cubs had continued to amaze everyone with their rapid learning. They could now understand complex human speech and had learned to communicate using a combination of sounds, gestures, and a special computer interface that translated their thoughts into words. On a bright Tuesday morning, the long-range sensors detected them. 12 massive Kethmori warships appeared at the edge of the solar system, each one larger than any human vessel ever built. The ships moved in perfect formation toward Earth, their dark hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Admiral Pierce stood in the command center with Captain Morrison, Dr. Carter, and Ambassador Carol Manning, who had been appointed as Earth's primary negotiator. On the screens around them, they could see the approaching fleet. "They're not responding to our communication attempts," reported Communications Officer Mike Barnes, who had been transferred to Earth Command for this crucial mission. "Keep trying," Admiral Pierce ordered. "We need to establish dialogue before they reach Earth." Storm and Shadow had been brought to the command center so they could see their people's ships arriving. Both cubs stood at the large viewing window, making soft sounds that the translation computers couldn't interpret. They seemed excited, but also nervous. Dr. Carter knelt beside Shadow, the smaller and more emotional of the two cubs. "Are you okay, Shadow? Are you scared?" Shadow turned to her and touched her face gently with his paw. The translation computer activated. "Not scared, worried? What if Kethmori not understand human love?" Storm moved closer to Captain Morrison. Through the computer, his voice was deeper and more serious than his brother's. "Father chose humans, for good reasons. We must show them his choice was correct." Suddenly, the communication screens lit up. A massive Kethmori face appeared, even more intimidating than Kethvar had been. This warrior was clearly older, with battle scars covering his muzzle and intelligent but cold golden eyes. "I am War Prime Sector of the Kethamori fleet," the alien said in a voice like rolling thunder. "We have come for the cubs of Kethvar, the Seeker. You will surrender them immediately for evaluation." Ambassador Manning stepped forward. "War Prime Sector, I am Ambassador Carol Manning, speaking for the government of Earth. We welcome you to our solar system. The cubs you seek have been under our care and protection as their father requested." Sector's eyes narrowed. Kethvar the Seeker was a fool who abandoned the warrior way. His cubs have been contaminated by your weakness. They must be cleansed and retrained in the proper Kethmori manner. Storm made a sound that was almost a growl. Through the translator, his voice was firm. "War Prime Sector, I am Storm, son of Kethvar. I request the right to speak for myself and my brother." The War Prime seemed surprised that the cubs could communicate so clearly. "You speak with the soft tongue of the humans, young one. This proves the contamination I feared." "I speak with the voice my father wanted me to have," Storm replied. "He studied humans for many months before choosing them as our guardians. His choice was based on wisdom, not weakness." Shadow moved to stand beside his brother. "War Prime, we request that you observe us for the traditional evaluation period before making judgments. Our human family has taught us many things that might interest the Kethmori." Sector considered this. "Very well. The ancient customs will be observed. We will establish a temporary base on your moon. The cubs will demonstrate what they have learned during their time with humans. But know this, humans, if we find that you have made our young weak or corrupted their warrior spirit, the consequences will be severe." The next few days were tense as the Kethmori ships took position around Earth's moon. A delegation of Kethmori warriors came to Earth to observe Storm and Shadow. Dr. Carter had prepared extensive documentation of the cubs' development, but she wasn't sure if the alien warriors would be impressed by human scientific methods. The lead evaluator was a female Kethmori named Battle Sister Raksha. She was smaller than Sector, but moved with deadly grace. Her golden eyes missed nothing as she watched the cubs interact with their human family. "Show me your strength," she commanded Storm and Shadow during their first formal evaluation. Storm and Shadow looked at each other, then at their human friends. Dr. Carter nodded encouragingly. "Show her what you've learned." Instead of displaying physical strength, Storm walked over to a computer terminal and began solving complex mathematical problems. His paws moved skillfully over the controls as he demonstrated advanced problem-solving abilities. Battle Sister Raksha seemed surprised. Mathematics is a tool of engineers, not warriors. "A warrior who cannot think strategically cannot win battles," Storm replied. "Humans taught us that intelligence is a form of strength." Shadow approached a group of human children who had been brought to meet him. Instead of intimidating them with his size and claws, he gently played games with them, making sure they felt safe and happy. "Compassion is also strength," Shadow said. "Protecting those who cannot protect themselves requires courage." Battle Sister Raksha watched this display with growing interest. "These cubs show behaviors I have not seen in Kethmori young for many generations." Over the following days, Storm and Shadow demonstrated everything they had learned from humans. They showed how they could work as a team with humans to solve problems. They displayed their loyalty by protecting human friends from simulated dangers. They demonstrated their wisdom by resolving conflicts between different groups without using violence. But the most impressive demonstration came when a real emergency occurred. A fire broke out in one of the facility's storage areas, and several human workers were trapped inside. Without hesitation, Storm and Shadow rushed into the burning building. Their natural Kethmori strength allowed them to move heavy debris that humans couldn't lift. Their intelligence helped them find the safest path through the smoke and flames. But most importantly, their compassion drove them to risk their own lives to save humans who couldn't save themselves. When they emerged from the burning building carrying unconscious humans to safety, Battle Sister Raksha was silent for a long moment. I have never seen Kethmori cubs display such balanced warrior virtues, she finally said. They possess strength, intelligence, courage, and wisdom, but they also possess something we lost long ago. What is that? Dr. Carter asked. The understanding that the greatest warriors are those who fight to protect, not to destroy. War Prime Sekthor arrived for the final evaluation. He had been watching recordings of everything Storm and Shadow had done during their time with humans. His expression was unreadable as he faced the cubs and their human family. Storm and Shadow, sons of Kethvar, he said formally. The time has come for you to choose. You may return with us to the Kethmori fleet and take your place among our people. Or you may remain with the humans who have raised you. Storm and Shadow looked at each other, then at their human family. Dr. Carter felt her heart breaking, knowing she might lose the cubs she had come to love like her own children. War Prime, Storm said carefully, we request permission to propose a third option. Sekthor's eyes widened. No Kethmori had ever requested to change the ancient traditions. Speak, he commanded. We propose to serve as bridges between our peoples, Shadow said. We have learned the best of both Kethmori and human nature. We could help both species understand each other. Impossible, Sekthor declared. The return cycle requires a choice. Then we choose both, Storm said firmly. We choose to be Kethmori who remember what humans taught us, and humans who remember what our Kethmori blood gives us. The War Prime stood silent for a long moment, considering this unprecedented situation. Finally, he spoke. This choice has never been made before. But perhaps it is time for new traditions. Battle Sister Raksha stepped forward. War Prime, these cubs have shown us something remarkable. They have combined Kethmori strength with human wisdom. Perhaps they could teach our own young these forgotten virtues. Sekthor looked at the humans who had raised Storm and Shadow. You have done something no other species has accomplished. You have raised Kethmori cubs who are stronger, not weaker, for having known your compassion. He turned back to the cubs. Very well. You may choose your own path. But know that this choice will change both our peoples forever. Storm and Shadow looked at their human family with eyes full of love and gratitude. Then let us change both peoples for the better, they said together. The formal ceremony took place in a specially constructed amphitheater on Earth's surface, with representatives from both species watching. Storm and Shadow stood in the center of the circle, now fully grown to their impressive 7-foot height. Their silver and black fur gleamed in the afternoon sunlight, and their golden eyes held the wisdom they had gained from their unique upbringing. War Prime Sekthor and Admiral Pierce sat on opposite sides of the circle, representing their respective peoples. Dr. Carter, Captain Morrison, and the rest of the Endeavor crew sat in the front row, their hearts heavy with emotion. They knew that whatever choice Storm and Shadow made would change everything. Battle Sister Raksha stood and addressed the gathering. Today we witness something that has never happened in Kethmori history. Two cubs raised by an alien species will choose their own destiny. Their choice will determine not only their future, but the future relationship between the Keth Mori and humanity. Storm stepped forward first. His voice, now deep and resonant, carried clearly across the amphitheater through the translation devices. I am Storm, son of Kethvar the Seeker, raised by the crew of the human vessel Endeavor. I have lived among both peoples, and I have learned from both. He turned to face the Keth Mori delegation. My Keth Mori blood gives me strength, courage, and the instinct to protect those I care about. These are gifts I treasure and will never abandon. Then he turned to the human section. My human family taught me that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from choosing when to fight and when to show mercy. They taught me that intelligence is as valuable as physical power, and that love can be stronger than fear. Shadow stepped up beside his brother. I am Shadow, also, son of Kethvar, also raised by humans who showed us kindness when we were helpless cubs. I have learned that both our peoples possess virtues that the other lacks. He gestured toward the Keth Mori. Our people are brave, strong, and honorable. They understand the value of protecting what matters most. Then he gestured toward the humans. But humans understand something we forgot, that sometimes the greatest courage is in choosing not to fight. They risk their lives for strangers, care for the weak without expecting reward, and find strength in working together. War Prime Sekthor rose from his seat. You speak of choosing both peoples, but the ancient laws require a single choice. You are either Keth Mori, or you are not. Storm's golden eyes met the War Prime's gaze without fear. War Prime, with respect, my father Kethvar the Seeker chose to break with tradition when he left us with humans. His choice saved our lives and opened a door between our peoples that had never existed before. My father was a visionary, Shadow added. He saw something in humans that made him believe they could raise Keth Mori cubs to be better than either species alone. We are the proof that he was right. Dr. Carter stood up from her seat, her voice shaking with emotion. Storm Shadow, whatever you choose, please know that raising you has been the greatest honor of our lives. You've taught us as much as we've taught you. Captain Morrison also stood. You will always be part of our family, no matter where you go or what you become. Storm and Shadow looked at each other, communicating in the silent way they had developed over the years. Then Storm spoke again. We have made our choice. We choose to serve as bridges between our peoples. We will spend time with both the Keth Mori fleet and with human communities. We will teach young Keth Mori the wisdom our human family gave us, and we will teach humans the strength and honor of our Keth Mori heritage. But that is not a choice between peoples, protested one of the Keth Mori warriors. It is an attempt to be both. Shadow turned to address the warrior. Why must it be one or the other? Our father studied humans for months because he saw value in their ways. If Keth Mori ways were perfect, why would he have needed to seek something else? And if human ways were complete, Storm added, why do they need to learn courage and honor from us? Both peoples can become stronger by learning from each other. Battle Sister Raksha stepped into the center of the circle. War Prime, I have observed these cubs for days. They possess all the virtues of traditional Keth Mori warriors: strength, courage, intelligence, and protective instincts. But they also possess virtues that we have lost: compassion, wisdom, and the ability to build alliances instead of only fighting enemies. She gestured toward Storm and Shadow. Look at them. They are more complete warriors than any we have produced in generations. They are what Kethmori could become if we learned from their human teachers. Admiral Pierce stood up from the human, sighed. The choice these cubs are making could benefit both our species enormously. They could serve as ambassadors, teachers, and protectors for both peoples. War Prime Sekthor was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes studying Storm and Shadow carefully. Finally, he spoke. In all our history, the return cycle has never ended this way. But perhaps it is time for the Kethmori to learn new ways, just as these cubs have learned. He stepped closer to Storm and Shadow. You wish to be bridges between worlds. This is a path that has never been walked before. Are you prepared for the challenges this will bring? We are, both cubs replied in unison. Very well, Sekthor declared. I accept your choice, but with conditions. You will prove yourselves worthy of this unique path by serving both peoples with honor. You will spend equal time learning from Kethmori teachers and human mentors. You will be tested by both species to ensure you remain true to both sets of values. Storm bowed his head respectfully. We accept these conditions, War Prime. Shadow also bowed. We will prove that our father's faith in both species was justified. The ceremony continued with the formal exchange of gifts between the two species. The Kethmori presented the humans with advanced technology and knowledge, while the humans shared their medical expertise and diplomatic wisdom. But the most meaningful moment came when Dr. Carter approached Storm and Shadow with a special gift. It was a collar made from materials from both worlds, inscribed with symbols from both languages that meant family. You will always be our cubs, she said, tears streaming down her face as she placed the collars around their necks. No matter how far you travel or how much you grow, you will always have a home with us. Storm gently nuzzled Dr. Carter's hand. And you will always be our first and most important teachers. Everything good we accomplish will be because of what you taught us about love and kindness. Shadow touched Captain Morrison's shoulder with his paw. Our father Kethvar chose humans to raise us, but we choose humans to be our family forever. As the ceremony concluded, representatives from both species began making plans for the new alliance. Storm and Shadow would start their bridge-building work immediately, spending time with both Kethmori ship crews and human communities. War Prime Sekthor approached Dr. Carter and Captain Morrison. Your species has accomplished something remarkable. You have taken 2 alien predator cubs and raised them to be better than either of our species alone. The Kethmori will not forget this gift. The gift was mutual, Captain Morrison replied. Storm and Shadow taught us just as much as we taught them. They showed us that love can cross any barrier, even species. As the sun set on Earth, Storm and Shadow stood together looking up at the stars where both their people's ships waited. They had chosen a path that no one had ever walked before, but they were not afraid. They had been raised by humans who taught them that love could overcome any challenge, and they carried the strength of their Kethmori heritage to face whatever lay ahead. Are you ready, brother? Storm asked Shadow. As ready as we can be, Shadow replied. Our real work starts now. Together, they walked toward their future, knowing they carried the hopes and dreams of both species on their shoulders. But they also carried something even more powerful, the love of a human family who had shown them that the greatest strength comes from choosing to protect and nurture rather than to conquer and destroy. The age of cooperation between humans. and Keth Mori was about to begin, and it would all start with two cubs who had learned that being different didn't mean being enemies. 5 years had passed since Storm and Shadow made their historic choice to serve as bridges between the human and Keth Mori peoples. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have imagined when Captain Morrison first found two helpless cubs on a dying alien ship. The Human-Keth Mori alliance had become the most powerful force for peace in known space. Joint fleets of human and Keth Mori ships patrolled trade routes, responding to emergencies and protecting innocent beings from pirates and other threats. The combination of human diplomatic skills and Keth Mori warrior strength had proven incredibly effective. Storm now commanded one of these mixed fleets from the bridge of a ship called Unity. The vessel itself was a marvel of cooperation, built using both human engineering and Keth Mori technology. Human crew members worked alongside young Keth Mori who had volunteered to learn the soft ways that Storm and Shadow had mastered. "Captain Storm, we're receiving a distress call from the Vega colony," reported Lieutenant Karen Foster, the human communications officer. "They're under attack by raiders." Storm, now a magnificent adult Keth Mori, standing over 8 feet tall, moved with controlled grace to the command center. His golden eyes held the same intelligence and compassion they had shown as a cub, but now they also carried the confidence of a proven leader. "Response time to Vega?" he asked. 18 hours at maximum speed," replied Sub-Commander Grakthar, a young Keth Mori who served as Storm's second-in-command. "Too long," Storm said. "Patch me through to the Shadow's diplomatic mission. We need to coordinate our response." The main screen lit up with the image of Shadow aboard a different ship. Where Storm had become a fleet commander, Shadow had chosen the path of diplomacy and cultural exchange. He was currently mediating a trade dispute between 3 different alien species near the Centauri system. "Brother," Shadow said, his calm voice bringing immediate comfort to Storm's crew. "I see the situation at Vega. My diplomatic ship can reach them in 12 hours. Can you handle armed raiders with a diplomatic vessel?" Storm asked, concerned for his brother's safety. Shadow smiled, showing teeth that were still impressively sharp despite his peaceful nature. "I have some new friends who might be able to help. The Zelkan Republic owes us a favor from last month's peace negotiations. Their battle cruiser is only 6 hours from Vega." This was how the brothers had learned to work together, Storm providing direct military support when needed, while Shadow built the alliances and relationships that made peaceful solutions possible. "Excellent," Storm said. "We'll provide backup in case the diplomatic solution doesn't work." "It will work," Shadow replied confidently. "The raiders are actually refugees from the Outer Rim who lost their homes to a plague. They're desperate, not evil. I think we can find them a new home and turn them into allies instead of enemies." As Storm's fleet changed course toward Vega, he reflected on how much both species had changed. Young Keth Mori now trained not just in combat, but in conflict resolution, medical aid, and protection of civilians. Human cadets learned Keth Mori techniques for courage, honor, and physical excellence. Captain Storm called Dr. Linda Martinez, the ship's human science officer. "I'm receiving data from the colony about the raiders' ships. Their technology is outdated, and their life support systems are failing. Shadow is right. These aren't professional pirates." Storm nodded. "Prepare. Medical teams and emergency supplies. If Shadow can negotiate a peaceful solution, we'll need to provide humanitarian aid." On the other side of the galaxy, Shadow's diplomatic ship Harmony arrived at Vega Colony ahead of schedule. But instead of finding raiders attacking innocent colonists, Shadow discovered something much more complex. The raiders were indeed refugees, families with children who had been traveling for months looking for a new home. Their desperate attacks on the colony supply ships weren't motivated by greed, but by the need to feed their starving children. Shadow requested permission to beam aboard the refugees' lead ship. Despite protests from his security team, he went. Alone, knowing that showing fear would make negotiation impossible. The refugee leader was an alien species Shadow had never encountered before, tall, thin beings with blue skin and large eyes that showed deep exhaustion and worry. "I am Shadow of the Kethmori," he said, using the formal introduction that often impressed other species. "I come to offer help, not to fight." The refugee leader, who called himself Vectar, stared at Shadow in amazement. "You are the bridge builder, the Kethmori who speaks of peace instead of war." Shadow was surprised. "You know of me?" Stories of the two Kethmori cubs raised by humans have spread across the galaxy. Some say it is legend, others say it is hope. "It is truth," Shadow replied. "And that truth has taught me that every problem has a solution if both sides are willing to talk instead of fight." Within hours, Shadow had worked out an agreement. The Vega colony had plenty of unused land and needed workers for their expanding agriculture program. The refugees had farming skills and families who needed homes. The solution was so simple that both sides wondered why they had been fighting instead of talking. When Storm's fleet arrived, they found celebration instead of battle. Human colonists and alien refugees were working together to set up temporary housing and plan permanent settlements. "How do you do it?" Storm asked his brother over their private communication channel. "You make it look so easy." "I learned from the best teachers," Shadow replied. "Remember what Dr. Carter always told us? Every being wants the same basic things: safety for their family, enough food to eat, and a place to belong. When you help people get those things, they stop being enemies." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Carter was working in her new laboratory at the Human Kethmori Cultural Exchange Center. At 55, she had gray streaks in her hair, but her eyes still sparkled with the same curiosity that had led her to study two alien cubs years ago. She was currently overseeing a remarkable program. Young Kethmori cubs were living with human families as part of a cultural exchange, while human children spent time learning from Kethmori mentors. The program had waiting lists of families from both species eager to participate. "Dr. Carter," called one of her assistants, "the Evening News wants to interview you about the success of the exchange program." Carter smiled as she watched through the window at a human child playing gently with a Kethmori cub in the facility's garden. "Tell them the real story isn't about my research. It's about what happens when different species choose to see each other as family instead of as threats." Captain Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, was giving a speech at the Earth Defense Academy to a graduating class that included both human and Kethmori cadets. At 60, he was one of the most respected leaders in the Alliance. "When I first found Storm and Shadow," he told the mixed audience, "I thought we were just rescuing two alien babies. I had no idea that we were actually beginning the greatest friendship in galactic history." A young human cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, what was the most important thing you learned from raising the cubs?" Morrison thought for a moment. "That courage isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about doing the right thing even when you're afraid. Storm and Shadow's father had the courage to trust a species he had never met. We had the courage to accept that trust, that courage." changed everything. A Kethmori cadet spoke up. Admiral Morrison, my people say that Storm and Shadow are the greatest warriors of our generation, even though they rarely fight battles. How is this possible? Because they understand what true victory looks like, Morrison replied. Winning a battle might solve one problem, but preventing the battle from happening in the first place solves many problems and creates new possibilities. Back on the Unity, Storm received a message that made him smile. It was a video call from Earth showing young Kethmori cubs playing with human children in one of the integration centers. The cubs were carefully gentle with their smaller human friends, just as Storm and Shadow had learned to be years ago. "Look, Storm!" one of the human children called out to the camera. "Rex taught me how to climb trees with my claws." "I don't have claws," the child corrected herself, giggling. "But Rex showed me how to use my hands like claws." Rex, a young Kethmori cub with golden fur, gently picked up the human child and placed her on a low tree branch. "Humans are different but not weak," Rex said in careful English. "Different can be good." Storm felt his heart swell with pride and joy. This was what his father Kethvar had dreamed of when he chose to trust humans with his children. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just peace between species, but the birth of something entirely new. Shadow's voice came over the communication system. "Brother, are you watching the news from Earth?" "Yes," Storm replied. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Our father would be proud," Shadow said quietly. "We kept his faith, and it grew into something bigger than any of us imagined." Storm looked out at the stars, where human and Kethmori ships flew together as partners and friends. In the distance, he could see another ship responding to a different emergency call, this one crewed by beings from 6 different species, all working together because they had learned from the human Kethmori example. "Do you think we did enough?" Storm asked his brother. "Do you think we lived up to what everyone hoped we could become?" "Look around you," Shadow replied. "Look at the gal."